4 years ago, I was at an all-time low. Things weren't great for me. My well-being had declined to the point that I genuinely felt I'd lost control of my life. I couldn't even leave my bedroom most days. I felt hopeless. I was suffering from depression, and at the time, I didn't even know what it was. I was afraid, and in a world where we're supposed to be more connected than ever, I felt alone. See, as humans, we can find it hard to open up. It can be difficult to ask for help. The scary thing is, though, that only 1 in 4 people suffering from depression speak up about it. So think about how many people you could be speaking to on a daily basis that suffer in silence. My depression wore me down to the point that I had to drop out of university, but this prompted me to go and get help. And it wasn't until I began to understand what made up my own well-being that I was able to piece my life back together. That's why this topic's so important to me. And I believe it's imperative that we all make an effort to value our own well-being and learn about it, for the sake of looking after ourselves and for looking after those in our lives. Now, unfortunately for us, as a complex species, there isn't a one-size-fits-all equation for how to look after yourself. If there was, my talk would be much shorter today. But over the last 100 years, there's been countless scientific studies to try and find what makes for a happy and a healthy life. Throughout all the studies over the years, one of the trends that emerged consistently was the positive correlation between the warmth of the relationships in our lives and our overall well-being. Yet whilst our need for meaningful relationships hasn't changed over the last 100 years, technology has radically shifted how we form and maintain these relationships. It was found that 40% of relationships are now started online. People that never would have met before being brought together face to face. Or think about the lives of people who suffer from disabilities that affect their communication and how they've been transformed as they can now talk to their loved ones. And on a much less serious note, technology connects us to everyone in our lives every day. We can be constantly messaging, sharing music, news, funny pictures of dogs. I could go on and on. However, it's this ability to be constantly connected through our device that gives us the constant opportunity to disconnect from what's happening around us. Next time you're in a restaurant, go in and just count how many people are in the company of someone yet glued to their phones. We don't need technology to have a conversation. We don't need it to have a human interaction. Yet we often allow ourselves to become distracted. But this is not a blame game. Okay, I'm not pointing fingers saying whose fault it is. It makes sense why we want to use these devices. They're designed that way. In fact, the 2 other industries whose product hook our brains in the same way that these applications do are the drugs industry and the gambling industry. Now, I know that there's a significant difference between being addicted to hard drugs and playing Candy Crush for 5 hours a day, but the science suggests that it triggers the exact same regions of the brain, and therefore they both pose a significant health risk to our society. So why is there such a lack of regulation with the use of technology? You may think it's not necessary, but the science suggests otherwise. A study recently required 40 participants to take 20 minutes to prepare an individual presentation. They would then have to give the presentation to an expert panel of judges. Now, the participants were split into 2 groups. One group had their phones confiscated from them at the start of the 20 minutes, and the other group were allowed to keep their phones with them. Overall, the group that were allowed to keep their phones with them reported lower levels of anxiety whilst preparing, and overall outperformed the group that had their phones confiscated. Now, there's 2 ways that we can interpret these results. On one hand, we can say, let's just give everyone a phone and they'll be much less anxious and much better at presenting. Problem solved. Or, on the other hand, we can see that there's a much bigger problem here. We now have a generation of adults that have become dependent on their device, adults that can't function to the same level or cope when they are separated from them. And we've only been exposed to this level of technology in the last 10 years. So think about the repercussion for this generation of children, of whom 70% have used a tablet online by the age of 3. Think back to when you were a kid. When I was a kid, we used to play imagination games like cops and robbers. Now, as an 8-year-old, you can get in some pretty heated debates about whether someone's imaginary bullet has hit you from across the room. But this is where we learn as kids to cooperate with each other and to compromise. The more time kids spend learning through a screen, the less time they have to develop these essential face-to-face skills. This generation of kids will also experience a different parent-child relationship than ever before. I never want to hear my child say, "Dad, why are you still looking at your phone?" But it's become such a common sight to see a child wanting their parent's attention while their parent is glued to their device. How many generations of emotionally deprived children before we realize that we need to change our behaviors to protect our well-being in a digital world? In the last 10 years already, depression and anxiety in teenagers has been increasing. Loneliness levels have spiked. Suicide rates have tripled. It's more apparent than ever that if we do not have a sensible approach to this digital world, that the consequences could be detrimental. And at a time where working from home is encouraged, at a time where travel restrictions are being implemented to reduce overheads, what can we do as an organization to ensure the well-being of our workforce? Another fact that doesn't help things is that the amount of time in a day that we've been using a screen has been increasing. Whilst, believe it or not, the number of hours in a day has remained exactly the same. So where are we spending less time? Less time sleeping, less time exercising, less quality face-to-face time with each other, less time building those essential community links. I believe that it's our moral responsibility, both as industry leaders in a digital world and as humans raising the next generation, to ensure that the well-being of humans is made a priority as we continue to advance our technologies. The good news is that we don't have to reinvent the wheel to do this, and we don't have to look far for inspiration. Our partners at Google have invested so much in creating a well-being infrastructure to support us. They offer app suggestions, advice columns, useful toolkits, all to support our well-being. Admittedly, a lot of these suggestions are restrictions on the use of technology, but the concern for well-being is there, and that's the important first step. The second step then is, how can we use technology to enable our well-being, to strengthen it? My dad has his Fitbit data feed into his life insurance company, and when he hits a target number of steps in a week, he gets a voucher for Starbucks or the cinema. I know it can be kind of repetitive hearing how many steps someone's done that day, but I like to hear it now, and I would encourage it because it's the perfect example of how we can use technology simply to improve our well-being. The second step then is, why does this have to stop with our steps? What if our devices could track the number of face-to-face conversations we had in a day, and we could be rewarded when we hit weekly targets? What if our devices used our biometric data to help us identify the situations in life causing us the most anxiety and help us to reduce these behaviors? What if the data collected about us online was used for genuine suggestions to improve our lifestyle rather than targeted commercial ads? The technology to achieve this is definitely not out of reach, but perhaps it is the motive that we're lacking. And I guarantee that as the focus of this society shapes towards one that is more aware of mental health importance, that an organization's bid to support well-being will not just be seen as a nice thing to do, but it will be a corporate advantage. So what about now? What about the present? Atos can already be proud as we are leading by example. The work that we are doing to transform the public sector will be immensely important for our future well-being. We are demonstrating clearly how we can use our expertise, our technology, to improve current processes, increase efficiency, cut government spending, and overall make more resources to look after the people. We must continue to be involved in projects like this, continue to make well-being a focus both externally for our clients and internally for our workforce. As well as this, you can be a leader as an individual. Use technology to strengthen your real-life relationships, not to replace them. The people in your life need your attention much more than your device does. So let's be more present where we can be. I know it can be hard, but try and think about the intent each time you go to reach for your device and practice forming healthy habits. We all have the ability to change our lives for the better, and we're lucky enough to be in a position to help others do the same. Be it through the innovative work that we can do as an organization, or our ability to connect with each other as individuals. If we put our minds to it, we can make this digital world the best place to be. Thank you.